Hello, Amazon sellers. I am Leah McHugh, and I am here with former Amazonian Chris McCabe, and we're here to talk about why many of you are not getting any response from Amazon sellers performance team. Chris used to work on that team, so maybe you can shed some light on that.
Right. So it's not just the performance queues, it's the notice teams, especially. That's the big black hole right now. But people who are suspended, whether it's an ASIN suspension, a listing suspended, or their entire account, they're reporting to us that they're not getting any responses at all in some cases. These aren't sellers who have been final worded, so-called final worded, which is where they've told you they may not respond to future appeals or queries. These are people who might even have done the appeal button where it's date and time stamped when they're going to respond to you. So that's kind of an alarming trend heading into Q4 when you know there's going to be more volume in the email queues, there'll be more appeals, and it will take them longer anyway. Historically, it has. They've had delays in Q4, peak holiday. For us to be in mid-ish September and facing October, November of rising amounts of appeals and not getting answers now, that's a big problem. So.
And it's not, it's like you said, it's not just seller performance, it's notice, and it's also, a lot of the times you'll email one team and another team will respond and tell you to respond to them from now on. And it's particularly the notice team on things that have nothing to do with intellectual property.
Right.
So
we've seen people suspended for, these are just a couple examples, suspended for reviews abuse who suddenly start getting emails, I guess because the investigator found some unresolved IP infringements or counterfeit claims on the account.
That's not always the case. Sometimes
and so they start asking them for invoices, or they ask them for proof of authenticity or for supplier information. Guess what? When you're suspended for sales rank manipulation or reviews abuse, they shouldn't be asking you for that stuff. Those are just mistakes, but they at least answer in those cases. What I've seen that's most alarming recently is silence.
So what should sellers be doing if they're not getting any sort of response?
If you're not getting an answer within a reasonable amount of time, you've appealed, they told you when they'd respond, they missed their deadline, fine. Give it another 24 hours or so, maybe, depending on what the odds are that they responded to you. If you're on your second or third attempt to get their attention, you can't really wait more than a day. You have to keep emailing them the appeal, and you have to think about escalating it, whether it's to executive seller relations or to other teams. If you have an account manager, go to that person, tell them what's going on, get them to create an internal escalation. You probably already figured that out yourself, and maybe you've tried that, but sometimes that doesn't result in a response either. So then go back to the external escalations and say, we have an internal one. We sent the plan of action. We sent an appeal that was denied with no reason, or we never got a response, period. Keep at them and keep escalating it to multiple places. Don't depend on just one queue, just one person, even if that one person's your account manager.
Which doesn't mean that they should be spamming the queues with a bad plan of action, or with the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Don't send the same thing over and over. 4 escalations have 4 unique appeals that you're sending. They don't have to be 100% totally different from each other, revamped, where it's like you're writing 4 different books at the same time. You're trying to get their attention, and the content will be similar, but don't send the same exact thing to Jeff that you sent to seller performance that they're already ignoring. And one other terrible thing that we found out lately, especially through asking account managers and other internal teams that we've had been in touch with, like account health services, is that a lot of times they're annotating the account, and we find out that the accounts are annotated, but they don't respond, and there's no explanation for why they're not answering. So they have read it, they have reviewed it, they didn't like something about the POA, and we're actually
just don't tell you.
And they don't tell you what it is, and they don't respond. We're able to find out in a lot of cases what they didn't like by asking an account manager to find out, or asking account health services. But they are the only people who seem to know, and you would never know unless you were told in the response to your appeal, which is sort of a desperate situation to be in.
Well, it's dangerous as well, because each one of those appeals that they're annotating your account on, that counts as a denied appeal. So if you continue to send denied appeals not knowing that they're being denied, you're actually lowering your chance of reinstatement in the long run.
Yeah. And then they can final word you. That's the absurd thing. Then they will send you final word because you've sent them several requests for an update because you don't know they've already denied your appeal internally and they've only annotated the account. So it's a very Kafkaesque situation where you're trying to read their minds.
It's more and more important that you have a bulletproof plan of action before you submit anything. And we've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's important.
Say it many times.
The plan of action is the last step. You need to be doing an investigation into what went wrong. You need to be actually implementing the things that you're telling Amazon you're doing, and then you send the plan of action. Because unless it's 100% ready to go, implemented, we fixed the problem,
viable.
You're just reducing your chances every time you send in a bad plan.
Right.
And like you said, it's getting harder and harder to even get a response, so you don't want to burn through the few chances that you do have.
Right. Make the first one count. And that's what we tell all of the members in our membership, right? Make the first, go through the course before you appeal, if you're a member. Go through the course, build a POA the right way. Don't just dash one off and say, well, if I really get stuck, then I'll call for help. Every month that goes by, it's getting harder and harder to do that. So the first one has to be at least in the ballpark of really good and potentially acceptable. If it's 50% of the way there, they might not respond at all. They might just annotate your account, have a nice day. You're going to have to chase them just for the response, which is new, fairly new to this summer, I would say.
And just one more thing that I wanted to mention, because it's something that, again, we mentioned before, but a while ago now. If you're sending in a plan of action, don't send it as an attachment. Send it in the email body if you're emailing the queues, because they don't always see or get the attachments. And that just gives them yet another reason to not respond or mark it as no POA or no viable POA.
Right.
So make sure that you're putting it in the email body in the escalations as well. Don't send it as an attachment.
Right. And I know Amazon's a black box. A lot of this communication's opaque, very difficult to understand anyway. If you do get a response, it's like that. When you get absolutely no response, you're out in the desert trying to find some water. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're escalating, not even knowing if the POA itself is acceptable. So if you have to get some professional eyes on it, like mine or anyone who can tell you if it's a good POA or not, then do that. Maybe not post in Facebook groups and seller forums and get a million different opinions on it. That's the other end of the spectrum. But we understand how difficult, especially at this time of year, it can be to run into an email that says you have 72 hours to submit a plan of action. And then you maybe talk to Account Health Services, maybe you don't even talk to them, and they give you very vague guidelines that aren't specific. So like Leah said, you have to be the investigator, you have to be the expert on your account, you have to conduct an internal review to make sure not just you're telling them what they want to hear. Don't focus on that when you talk to Account Health Services. Focus on what's the nitty-gritty, what are the ASINs, what are the complaints. Make sure you nail the root causes. If you do not get the root causes correct, like Leah said, they'll either say no POA or didn't identify the root cause, and trust me, they don't read the rest of it. It gives them the best excuse in the world to throw it away, and then, like we said a moment ago, maybe they don't even tell you that they're throwing it away. Usually there's some general denial that you get, but lately we haven't seen as many general denials or requests for greater details. They used to, for months, we need more details. They don't tell you what details really. They just give you generic copy and paste. But we're not seeing as much of the greater details messaging. We're hearing silence, and that's what worries us the most.
Right. So if you have to submit a plan of action and you're given 72 hours, use those 72 hours to make sure that you're submitting the best plan of action possible. And if you wanted to have Chris take a look at it before you submit, you can reach him at ecommercechris.com/contact.
Yep. And I have a 30-minute review. I have a service that is a 30-minute consult. It doesn't take me that long to look at a POA and figure out if it's going to be acceptable by Amazon standards or not. So reach out to us, ecommercechris.com. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.